like cooler for like a younger website, or like, so it always has to match the audience. Like if you're going to
Like,
use like,
do you want to exit this page? No,
Yes,
this
queen.
is Liddy.
yeah, like you could use yes queen on like Grindr or Scruff or something.
I think that the prevalence of this job, which we hear a lot more of now, is tech-based.
Nailed it. You landed that plane, Jackie.
Seen recently like a member experience position. You'll see informational design experience. You'll see customer experience. So the whole experience field isn't necessarily towards digital products or products themselves.
I've already lost.
I like
cool.
User experience is like baked into even the title, like UX, because technically it should be UE, but it's like, no, like UX. How does that feel to the observer?
I mean,
yes, that's right, listeners. I know these things. If someone came to us today, I could say, listen, we have about a 54% male demographic.
Hey boys, what's up?
We also, for some reason, are very popular in the UK, not as much in the US. So,
hey, love. Isn't it? Spotted tea and all that.
And most of our listeners, I think, are in like the 30 range demographics, right? Like 25 to 42, something like that. So like
millennials.
Like a heat map too, you can look at for like how people use their thumbs on like the apps. And the most popular part of like the most important information or the stuff that you need them to click on should be kind of in a diagonal on the phone, because that's like that's the easiest part to get to your phone. When I was younger, I really actually wanted to be a fashion designer. And then when I was told that was too gay, I moved on to architecture. I'm kidding.
You're too gay for fashion. That's the first time I've ever heard that.
But it's not a requirement for a UX designer at all to know that. And that was one of the reasons I kind of wanted to do it, is because I don't want to learn coding.
No one does.
Pass. No.
Not gay enough.
Not yet.
It's not gay enough. No, absolutely not.
Maybe they're not a website developer. I think that might be a completely different job. Maybe the UX
that's front-end design.
Maybe the UX designer creates the package that you give to the web designer.
Hi, everyone. Come on in. You're safe now. It's We're Experts Now. I'm your host, Rebecca.
I'm your other host, Jackie. Happy to be here for another week. It's a nice little Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Been doing anything fun lately for the spooky season?
Well, yes, I have a little amateur alert news flash for the spooky season. It's Halloween weekend over here in the City of Angels and Demons. And LA loves to go all out for, well, I don't know if you know this, but LA, it's a lot of people who want to play dress up and have too many pyrotechnics on hand. Also, your tea just knocked over, so don't spill strawberry refresher all over your carpet.
I'm thriving over my AirPods.
You're living an amateur alert right now. Like, what am I talking about? Well, I just had like a little mini whoopsie that I want to figure it out. I want to solve this problem for myself. I had lots of different costume changes. I did a sexy alien, loved it. It was great. Last night I did sexy vampire. Now I'm really leaning into my Halloween self because of missing out on it for so long. So I've had, 2 costumes already, but what is the one thing you need for a vampire costume, Jackie?
The fangs.
The fangs. You need the fangs. And that was the thing with my alien costume. Really, the only thing that made it alien was it came with a headband with 2 fake eyes on it. Otherwise, it's just, like an iridescent rave outfit. But the fangs I had the sexy, sort of Victorian dress with the, modified hemline for the modern gal.
Yeah, you're the first one to ever say sexy Victorian dress.
Well, it was long. It's like high hemline in the front and then long in the back. And then I ended up classic girl cutting her bangs 5 minutes before a party energy. I was cutting the back of the dress to have like sort of tapered style so I could be more scandalous. But I bought fangs. I splurged the extra $5 at the unnamed Halloween store. I won't give any more plugs to than they need, and brought the fangs home. And it's not like a full mouthpiece set. It's just the two fangs, and it comes with these. I thought it was the silicone beads that they put in things that you're not supposed to eat, and I almost threw it away. But they're these little beads that you put them in hot water, and then they turn clear, and then they turn into this putty, and you're supposed to roll the putty up and put it in the fangs, and then put that on your teeth, take a mold of it, and then while it's still wet, you take it out and let it dry. And then it's supposed to be like a kind of removable mold shaped to your tooth. I could not figure it out. So I have a costume gay who has all kinds of experience, who's like, I know what you probably did wrong. So that's going to be on my list of things I want to become an expert on, is fake teeth and accessories and monster makeup. So I didn't have my fangs, but I was like, you know what? They only come out when someone tasty is around. So I just had fake blood and a hot dress and a cape.
There you go. I mean, cape was going to be my second answer. I was like fangs, then cape.
And I should have done like long red blood red nails, but I just,
I was
went
going
gothic.
to go out and actually be social for the first time in years, and then I got the stomach flu. So I almost wasn't able to record this morning because I was like, I think I'm dying. And luckily I came around, and no, I'm not calling a hangover a stomach flu. I am literally so old that I was just like, whatever.
Well, here we are, and talking about our experiences. And what are we talking about on the pod today?
We're going to talk about something I know literally nothing about. No. User experience. So I think it's usually called UX design. I feel like I've seen UXI, but I don't know if that's a completely different thing. User experience interface.
Yeah, I think it's interface. I only know about it adjacent because my first events job was in a tech co-working space and school, and so some of the people were there learning UX UI. And I've also seen it, I think it's totally a separate thing, but I've seen a version of like user interface when I was in art school, people who were studying design, because it's like, well, how are wheelchair users going to enter your building? How is your design going to like cater to these kinds of people? Like, what is the actual interface of people using it? Or like, if it's product design, you have to go make a mock-up of your product and take it around and like kind of figure out what the UI is.
We do that with events, like the attendee experience. Like sometimes, we don't do this for the caliber of events that we do at this point because we do much smaller ones. But back when I was doing like massive conferences or like these really detailed out like design programs, like Adobe was my client at one point. And so, Adobe software is going to want to have really cool cutting edge things. And so what you would do is you walk them through the event. Okay, so as I walk in, like, I want somebody to come up and bring me a drink. Oh, actually, what if that's a girl with a skirt that has the champagne glasses, and you just pick up the right? So I've seen it in that way. And so the only way I can kind of conceptualize it is in that kind of sense, what the user, the attendee or whatever is experiencing now. Like, you can hear the nervousness in my voice.
I know, you're like really lost confidence in that sentence. I'm associating though more with, is this a technology world thing? Like, or user experience of a website?
Like, I think UX design most of the time is talking about websites and technology nowadays. I think that's the starting place. Is we've heard of user experiences before, but like we used to think of it in the product sense, right? And so as I have heard the user experience role far and far more in the last like 5 to 10 years, that has pretty much exclusively been associated to tech roles and like application-based roles. Like, I don't know of anybody that's like a user experience for shopping malls or something, right? Like, I think that the prevalence of this job, which we hear a lot more of now, is tech-based. No, here's your
Nailed it. You
episode.
landed that plane, Jackie.
I just like, you know me, I think I am very knowledgeable and I don't like to, I really struggle when I know nothing on a subject. And I think that's the joy of this podcast is how much I'm struggling with it right now because like, okay, let's go tech-based.
Yeah. The
If
thing
it's
that I just have
tech-based,
to say it and get it out of the way, I keep thinking of Temple Grandin and those cows. And I'm like, Temple, that was an autistic person who was like, I know what these cows are feeling and why you're having such a problem getting these cows to slaughter. It's because they feel scared. You gotta have the Judas cow that leads them, and then you've got to change the like barricades of the fence posts here, and then here it gets tight so it feels like they're getting a little hug because cows like to be hugged, and then they will be led right to the slaughter. And it is technically more humane, but that is a altogether different type of user interface.
why is it that so much often you like are like slaughter, this is what, hot dogs are made out of? Like, why is it always
You know what? That's my user experience, Jackie. Okay. But now, okay. So now let's switch gears. Now I'm thinking of, user
I'm traumatized. I can't just switch gears. Like I'm sitting over here, like thinking about the TikTok that I watched last night of this girl hugging her cow. And now I'm like, what if that's the Judas cow?
Cows love a hug. I do like to see liberated cows. That's cool. But I also like to eat hamburgers. And aren't we all a beautiful, complicated portrait of contrast? I'm wondering, do UX designers have to know coding? Or are they just literally like, how would I, a regular person, log onto this website, see what the product is, try to order it, that kind of thing? Or do you have
really
to see
want
like,
to get it back on board?
I'm trying to wrangle you like those damn cows, Jackie.
I need 5 to 10 minutes. Where's my therapist? Linda?
Yeah, you need a therapy cow.
Linda.
Come on,
Oh God.
let's get the emotional
Okay.
support cow in here.
Okay, I blacked out on what everything you said before, but what I can start with is that I think they're the person who is like, you know what? All the buttons on your website should work. Like when you click on it, like it should work. Like, and if you have like, I think they're the people that are ensuring that like one, it looks nice. Like I think they do obviously design. So like, if you've seen a really poorly built website, I think they probably haven't had a UX designer. And if you see one that's really geared towards, the user experience.
Just had
this episode is pure chaos. This is the most chaotic episode.
My cat heard me talking about slaughterhouses, and she was like, "I actually have a few words to say on the subject."
I keep trying to change the subject. Okay, back to it. They make websites pretty. Like make sure that, like, for example, when we build registration sites, I like everything to be on one page. Like I don't want to have to like give you some information, click a button, give you some information, click. Like that to me is the most annoying thing in the world, right? Like why am I like I think I'm done. Don't tell me that I'm done because I'm pressing submit and then you'd be like, "No, that wasn't submit. That was just submit for that page."
That was submit, but do you want to confirm?
Yeah.
And then once you've confirmed, do you want to finalize? And then and I wonder like how someone gets prepared to do that job, because it feels like it would change per project, like what you need to know about the client. If it's like
market research, I think that's what you start to do. Like I imagine that you work with somebody who has that data, like our market demographic. If someone came to us, yes, that's right, listeners, I know these things. If someone came to us today, I could say, listen, we have about a 54% male demographic.
Hey boys, what's up?
We also, for some reason, are very popular in the UK, not as much in the US. So,
hey, love. Isn't it? Spotted tea and all that.
And most of our listeners, I think, are in like the 30 range demographics, right? Like 25 to 42, something like that. So like
Millennials. Okay.
Episode is purely chaotic. So if we were going to build a website, like I would want to tell, like, listen, this is our demographic. I would tell our UX designer, like, here's our color palette, our logo. This is the message that we want to get across. Maybe they're not a website developer. I think that might be a completely different job. Maybe the UX
that's front-end design.
Maybe the UX designer creates the package that you give to the web designer. Like I say our demographics, the UX designer is like, here's the flow and the layout and the beauty of the web page. Now, coder, go build it.
Yeah, I think it's like the head and the heart, and the UX is like the heart. It's like, yeah, you have the music theory, but did that song give me the emotion you're trying to give me? That was a whole mixed metaphor that, really had a lot to it, but not a lot to it actually. But yeah, I think that I'm imagining, and I want clarification on this from our expert, if the UX UI person, well, their UX, if the UX designer is more of coming in as like a consultant, like you have, let's build the functioning pieces we need, but how do we want the effect to be?
Well, I think it totally depends. Like, are you in-house at a big corporation doing their UX design? Or are you like, going out to mom and pop shops saying like, this is what's wrong with your website. We would get much more traffic if you were optimizing and
search engine
optimize. I've been meaning to do some research. Maybe the expert can help us.
We need this person that will be their case, test subject.
Yeah.
Freelance case study.
Because we sure aren't doing it. We should, maybe we do have our UX design. Like, let's think about our first logo, which I was really a big fan of.
Well, that's my other question of like, how do you make this a marketable job of like, there's probably someone who's already doing those jobs
Increased
at the
revenue.
company, and like, how do you make this a dedicated position where it's the only thing you're doing and it's not just another hat some other
I
position
think it depends.
is doing?
Like if you're Google and you have really like hundreds of platforms under their name at this point, if you talk about all the Google platforms, you probably have a department that is like working to synergize across all of those different platforms, like what is on brand with Google, right? That's why when you see like a hair product company gets acquired by like a larger one, it gets acquired by like L'Oreal, you'll see the branding kind of start to match the L'Oreal branding, right? Like, so I imagine that if you're in-house, you are working to standardize that UX design across all of the reach of your company. Whereas if you are an independent person, I imagine that you're trying to like, kind of like a photographer, you would build a portfolio. You would show what like people like, what is it that people have gotten out of it, right? So like increased traffic or like less, like say you're a sales website, right? And maybe you've had people having a lot of trouble buying stuff. So maybe you have increased sales or you have less negative comments on Yelp or whatever. Like your customer service complaints go down, right? And I think that you can then monetize those things, right? Like if I have 50%, if I'm a medium-sized company, I have 50% of the complaints and I'm hiring 6 people full time to deal with customer service and I have 50% of the complaints, I can save money on those 3 people's salaries. Right. So I think that like you absolutely can get phone calls when you don't turn.
Yeah, and I think a UX designer would say to silence our phones during a podcast. That would probably be respectful to our listeners.
It would be, and our co-hosts, but I over here like to live life on the edge.
Yeah, we like to shake up the model of podcasting. Okay, chewing, heard of it? Well, you will soon.
Should I answer it? Hello?
Yeah, get the guest. We've got our first caller on the line.
Okay, actually, I know she listens, so that was Ashley, and shout out to you, girl.
Ashley, you were almost our first call-in guest.
She is our first call-in guest. We're just gonna, in spirit, we love you, Ash. I
think you nailed it. I think you're definitely coming at it from the like corporate perspective of how it's actually going to be utilized as a role.
Mm-hmm. And how you like would monetize it if you are like a contractor, right? Like if you or like a consultant, like you were saying, like, oh, I have a portfolio. I've worked with these 10 businesses. It's increased their profits by 60% or whatever it may be. So you probably have to do a lot of follow-up posts and a lot of like checking in if it's working and probably like tweaking systems as you move forward.
Yeah, I wonder how long the like relationship lasts if they are more of one-off situations where it's like, do you get like a post-year check-in or a 50% discount if you need a little tune-up or whatever it is?
Yeah, like this work is guaranteed, you know, like for the lifetime of your car.
Yeah, what's the
Um,
warranty on a soft service?
so I think that we obviously know a lot on this subject. We are going to have a lot of really detailed
Mm,
questions for our expert. No, we know nothing. Any highlights are appreciated. Let's go enjoy our experience.
let's go
User our
define.
experience.
Let's go use our experience.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone, from the break. I hope you got to get your snackies in order. You're feeling all special and you're ready to get into the design of the day. This week we have actually Ben is part of like our conception story. Ben was at the old
Wow.
workplace when we all Bex and I met. I actually met Ben first. He's the original. And welcome to the pod, Ben.
I'm so happy to be here. It's so fun to learn about what I do for a living.
Well, and speaking of which, it's UX design. It is user experience, right?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what UX stands for.
Okay. And sometimes there's an I after it. What is the I?
Yes, yes, and no. So, like, UX design is if you think of it like an umbrella, and then there's all these different terms that fall under there. So, UX design is literally does everything. It does the research, it does the architecture, it does the interface, it does all of it. And then UI design is as a byproduct of that. So they focus on the front facing part of say like a digital product, like an app. So they focus on all the design layout of everything. There's also a product designer, and then you also have UX researchers too. And I'm noticing too as I look into like the UX life or UX jobs, other companies and other roles are pulling in that whole experience field. So you'll see I've seen recently like a member experience position. You'll see informational design experience. You'll see customer experience. So the whole experience field isn't necessarily towards digital products or products themselves.
I've
I
already
like that.
lost.
I like
Cool.
that user experience is like baked into even the title, like UX, because technically it should be UE, but it's like, no, like UX. How does that feel to the observer?
I mean, that's true. I mean, I never even thought about that, but yeah, experience is the X is better than the E.
It
Yeah,
totally
you're
is.
like,
No one wants UE. Like,
No, gross.
what is that? The United
Well, you probably
European
can't.
Union?
Yeah,
Like,
you
no.
probably can't say it because of that too.
EU.
Yeah, the UE, the EU. Oh, you're right too. Look at us. We passed school.
Geography, yes. School, all of it. We're
We
done.
killed it at school. We were
We
so
just
good at it.
passed it. We're so good.
Okay, so user experience, that's the umbrella. You do UX design, so you don't do the whole umbrella, you just do part of the umbrella?
So what's interesting about there are times I feel like an imposter because my job is very unique to UX. And so I do actually a lot of data visualizations. I do a lot of report layouts. So I apply a lot of that design thinking into the designs that I do for data for the reports because, as I mentioned earlier, the people have experiences in all different types of ways, right? And so it's not just how you use an app. It's not just how you use a computer. It's about also walking into a store. How does that make you feel from beginning to end? With our reports, we want to make sure it's designed in a way that it doesn't bore people because no one's really reading anymore also. So we're trying to create more data visuals that it can engage your readers. We want to be able to present numbers and qualitative information to our readers as well. That's going to give them the best experience possible. And so that's really what it's all about. And so I'm finding with my current job that I'm enjoying more the research aspect of UX, because I love getting to know people. I love asking questions, and it's kind of because they're the reason why we design things, right?
So that's how the research takes shape, actually, like asking people's firsthand experience, or are you like just like reading studies? Research feels very technical.
It's all different types of things. So I would plug my website, but my website is terrible and it needs to be redone. And if you ask any designer, they're like, yeah, my website's terrible. It needs to be redone. It always goes in the back burner. But yeah, one of the projects I worked on during my program was actually for Acorns, the financial investment app, if you're all familiar with it. And so one of the things that I did for my research is I actually went onto Apple's like App Store and read all the different types of the feedback that they had for that app. So that's part of the research too, is looking at the data that already exists. You're going out there and kind of looking at reviews, seeing what other companies are doing a competitive analysis. And then you can also do interviews, you can do focus groups, you can do surveys, you can do A/B testing, or I call it like this or that, when you have like designs. So you can show people two different designs and they can kind of figure out like what it is that they like more. So there's so many different things that go into the research, besides just, interviews or just asking questions.
Okay, first question. What do we need to improve on our one sheet that we sent out? Because the
real reason we invited you on.
I feel like it was so like I was so nervous. Like I was like, he's gonna have comments.
I mean, I actually did have comments. I mean, for like, it's not terrible. It's just like there's just a lot happening, a lot of different colors happening. And if you want me to, I'm more than happy to redesign it for future use.
Wow. And we will take any help that we can get, because that is like the 12th iteration too. Like we have changed it so many times. And I think this is like kind of where we talked about it in part one. As event planners, we do the attendee experience, like walking through the event. And I think that's really what our understanding is. But again, like we set up the pod in a lot of ways, kind of like events, because that's what we have done in the past, right? And I think for me, going into this more digital space, luckily Rebecca has far more experience in the digital space than I do, but I was like, I don't even know what we're doing. Let's give them 47 pages of information. They're going to want it. Rebecca's like, no, they don't.
I honestly think of you guys, because like event planning is similar to being a designer. You have to design things to give your clients the best experience possible. And so that's like, I think about you guys all the time, actually. And I think about like my time at our last place of employment.
I wondered if that like kind of fed into your experience, because that is sort of like the event planner thing, is like visualize the experience. How are you ingesting the event? And like, even with Jackie and I, when we like deal with something in events where there's some information that attendees didn't get or didn't follow, if it's one person, okay, maybe that's one person. But if it's like a repeat thing, it's like, okay, well, yeah, maybe people don't read long briefs anymore, like, are we needing to adapt with video or images, or how do we get people what they are going to ask for anyway?
That's how you know when it's a problem, when it is not a one-off thing, when more people start to complain about it. I know like one thing that someone had brought up for my current company is when we do events, someone had suggested in a survey of doing QR codes for like badges or name tags, so people can read it and they can take them to their LinkedIn profile or something. And I was like, that would provide such an exceptional experience for people. And so now I'm thinking like, how can I go about and design this moving for our next events or something like that? But it actually, to your point, Rebecca, my interest in design and like the whole people experience started years and years ago. And I just never knew that this field existed until, during the pandemic when the world was falling apart. But like when I was younger, I really actually wanted to be a fashion designer. And then when I was told I was too gay, I moved on to architecture.
You're too gay for fashion. That's the first time I've ever heard that.
But then I moved on to, I thought about, I want to be an architect. And so essentially being a UX designer is being an architect, because there's so much research and planning that goes into it. You want to provide an experience for your clients in their home. And then when the architect is done, they give it to contractors, right, to actually do the building. And that's kind of what designers do. They hand it off to developers, and then they build whatever it is that they're building. And then there's that constant back and forth, that iteration, that reiteration between the project and what people are saying and all that.
So what is it that your hand, like, and I think that's what her and I were trying to figure out. We're like, do you build the website? Do you like, what are the pieces? So
yeah,
like,
you doing JavaScript, or are you just the one that they're like, okay, it's built, you walk through and try it? Like, what's your technology?
There's a lot of companies that look for that unicorn where they're like, oh, I want someone that can do all this UX stuff and build it. UX designers are not coders. We're not like responsible for doing JavaScript or doing Python or doing all that stuff. And there are some designers that will go ahead and learn it, and because it makes them more valuable, but it's not a requirement for a UX designer at all to know that. And that was one of the reasons I kind of wanted to do it, is because I don't want to learn coding.
No one does.
Pass. No.
Not gay enough.
Not yet.
It's not gay enough. No, absolutely not.
What is it that you give the like developer then? Like, is it just like a lookbook, like here are our colors and this is the content? Or are you like actually laying it out and saying like, this is what I want it to look like?
So it's a whole process. So you start kind of, in most cases, and again, this is very generalized because when you're in the real world, so you don't have time sometimes to do all these different steps. And so what you do sometimes is create like a site map, which can show you like, if this is where you are, this is like the home screen, and then this is your navigation, and this is all the things then that go below that navigation. And then from there, you can usually do a user flow where it can show like if someone went to this page, what direction, where would they go from here? Like, and then you kind of figure out what's that whole flow, what's that whole process to navigate towards their end goal. And then part of the research too, you create personas about, Betty Smith, is like an architect, and like she lives here, and these are her problems, and these are like her goals. So you create that. And then you go on to making wireframes, which are just black and white, for the most part, minimalistic, different screens of what you can click on and go from and make edits through that process. And then from there, you make high fidelity wireframes, which do have the colors, are pretty detailed. Then you do have like the style guides, and you have all this, and then that is passed on to the developer. And then during that process, there's a lot of back and forth between multiple hands to kind of make sure everything is good to go by the end of it. And then when you hand that stuff off, you package it up and hand it to developers to try to build it. And then again, there's that communication. And oftentimes there's things called sprints where they break it apart into smaller pieces. So it's not just one giant project.
That's so much more complicated than I thought it was going to be.
No, it's a long relay race.
I was like, okay, you're just like, here's my PowerPoint. Like, these are the colors that we like. These is like, I kind of just thought you gave them a style guide and was like, this is what I want to accomplish. But that honestly doesn't make a lot of sense now that I'm saying it out loud. But
yeah. I know. What kind of experience would that be if you're like, these are the colors, but there's like no detail to that?
It's not a good user experience for the developer. That's what it's not, right?
And yeah, it's like interesting because it's such this unique slice of a career of like something a company would need. Like, it's not brand management and it's not the actual like building the technology, but it is such like a necessary field. I'm curious. Like, it seems like a new profession, I would imagine.
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like it's always been there. It just never, it's only kind of gotten this name probably within the past 10 years or so. I mean, I don't remember hearing about it when I graduated from college 13 years ago. Holy crap. But if I would have known about this, I would have been like, my whole life would have been different. I wouldn't be crying every day. I'd be like, I majored in Spanish. This is a waste of my life.
And we wouldn't have met then. And you got me through that breakup. And like, honestly, I don't know where I would have been had we not been work buddies and you took me on a walk every day, which again, just shows you're improving my user experience at work.
100%. And I've been in customer facing roles a lot. And that was like one of the things is I was trying to provide a good experience for people that I worked with. And that's like, it's all like hitting me now at 36 years old that's, my life has always been UX. or design really too.
But that's good that you majored in Spanish so that you can be fluent in Spanish now, right?
Mm-hmm. But
Are
also
you?
like, so I'm not as good as I was, but I'm still pretty good. But I am actually looking into getting my master's in anthropology, and because that is also a really good, not that you really need to have a degree for UX, but anthropology is a good way to, is a good kind of byproduct of UX design, because you're studying groups of people and you want to design for different groups of people. But I'm also really interested. One thing I forgot to mention for UX is also there's a UX writer. And so I'm also interested in the whole writing aspect. So about writing clear, concise instructions for users. And so that was kind of like a lot in like 30 seconds. But I think it's all very interesting that it's like coming together with like languages and design and experiences and yada,
Well,
yada,
yeah, I
yada.
would think like, what American users want is much different than in other countries in the world. Like it's going to be so based on just a long thread of different factors coming together.
Yeah, and my one thing that my mentor had said to me during my program is that you always want to left align everything, because in America, like, we read left to right. It's something that people are super familiar with. And so even when I see like in my current job too, where we like center right text, I'm always like, no, we need to left align this, because like it's harder for the user's eyes to like start here and then try to figure out like where do I start again. But then if you go to like the Middle East, where a lot of countries there read, I think, was it right to left, like that would be completely flipped. And so it's just interesting that for people to take into consideration.
I feel like there's so much psychology in there too, of just like why people make choices that they do, and that's honestly, anthropology was one of the things I thought about majoring in college, and then I couldn't figure out anything that I could do with it, and that was also at my period. That was in the period where I wasn't actually going to school, so it didn't matter what I was majoring in, anyways. But I I think that's like fascinating, because you're totally right. Like how the study of how a culture makes a decision, right? Like in, like, for example, like we just had an event recently with global advisors, right? Global folks at our event. And like we told everyone the bus takes off at 8, right? Some people, because they're a very time oriented country, showed up like 5 minutes early. And some folks are, an African country, not as time associated, more of culture associated. And they were all like late. And it did create a different experience for our different attendees, because some people were like, that's kind of rude that I have to wait, where the other folks were like, this is just totally culturally norm for us. And like trying to, especially when you're in America, trying to do this with, I would say, like websites, like you have so many different people from so many different cultures coming together and trying to please that many people. I noticed you said like the persona thing. Like, do you have to create like vastly different ones and then try to make each one happy? Because that sounds like a nightmare.
No, you have, so generally you have to pick, like, you have to think of who your audience is and then kind of go from there. And so like when I was doing my projects, I didn't really create my personas until after I was done either doing interviews or surveys, to kind of, and then I would do kind of like a combination of the people that I interviewed with and kind of came up with that. And I think there are times that people will come up with different personas, but that generally, historically, or that's kind of what I did with my projects, is to kind of do a combination of those. But then you do have to consider also like accessibility too. That's a whole other topic, which I can go into. But it's something that really interesting.
That was like, so we actually, when I had an event not that long ago, I was like building a template that we use normally, and someone brought it up to me that I think our text was like gray, and they were like, for accessibility, like you really don't want to have like a light gray text. You want to have like a white or a black, or I forget what they were saying. And it was something that I never, ever would have considered that was important to anybody. Super easy for me to fix, right? Like high impact, like low work, but you have to have that knowledge, which I certainly do not.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, and that's something I'm pushing for in my current job, is because we do so many reports that we do. Traditionally when you do documents, it's like black on white, but I've learned that black on white is a terrible experience, because it's so highly contrasted that really hurts the user's eyes after they've been looking at it for a while. And so what you really want to do is do an off black on a white. And if you think about any like physical books that you read, any Kindles, like they may look black, but there's like a subtle difference, and you can see the difference when you do something that's black is a hex code of like 6 zeros, and anything that's, if you change it slightly, like your eyes can tell a difference, and you're automatically like, oh, my eyes feel so much better.
And yeah, like a page isn't perfectly, well, sometimes pages are perfectly white or appear to be, but
And sometimes they're like an off white, yeah.
But like in books, like most books are like a grayish tone, like, right? Like, and then like my Kindle, which I use regularly now, like shout out to the planet. That's why I had to switch, but I love a paper book, but the Kindle is it's like a gray. It's not even an off white. I wouldn't call it that color at all. And it is much nicer on the eyes. And I never really thought about that. That's going to take me a minute to like trickle through.
And if you ever want to do a follow-up about just accessibility, I can talk about that too, because I've taken some certificate courses and taken so many different things on it. But it's really interesting. Just like, even when you design apps, like you have to think about like an app, like how can someone who only has one arm, like how can they operate this? Even if it's, even if someone's like holding a cup of coffee and like has a free arm, that's still an accessibility issue and providing a good experience. And so there's also like something like a heat map too you can look at for like how people use their thumbs on like the apps. And the most popular part of like the most important information or the stuff that you need them to click on should be kind of in a diagonal on the phone, because that's the easiest part to get to your phone.
I was just thinking about how my thumb is. Yeah, I didn't know that also my phone was kind of collecting that data. I guess, is it just on click points, or like can it actually? It's just like, oh, this button, this link.
So it's more like when you do like a user testing, I think there's certain types of software that you can put on the phone or even on your computer, because there's also like an eye scan too, that like if you do a testing on a computer, they can like somehow read like how your eyes are navigating on the screen too, to kind of better provide it. That's again with like organizations that have a lot of money, probably like Google or Apple.
I just don't like that, like they can do that, right? Like that every part of what I do at this point in the world and society can be measured, like even where I'm looking on a page. That's bonkers, big brother.
I know. It's kind of this like deal with the devil though, right? Because it's like, yeah, we're having this whole debate with AI and the progress we're making with AI and how it might be infringing on freedoms and like just our agency and free will or IP, intellectual property. But really, a lot of technological advances could be used to better access, make better access for people with different abilities and like help people regain sight or taste or mobility or, so there is like, a real positive benefit, but there are some creepy angles to it.
That's definitely like another topic, and I'm not a topic on AI at all, but it's really like we shouldn't be scared of it, but we should embrace it. You have to learn how to use it to like really kind of use it to its best advantage. There's like a lot of some of the professional development stuff I've taken. A lot of schools, there's like a whole debate about AI in schools because it's also helping like students of color kind of better like share their stories through their own voice, rather than like the cisgendered white like voice that we've been taught growing up all the time. So it's really interesting how it's being used in like different places.
Well, we are having a chat GPT episode in the future, so we will.
We'll ask Chat GPT.
Yeah, I was writing questions the other day about sentience, so we'll let you know how that goes. But I do think that there's so many things that we can do with AI and digitalization, right? Like kind of what you were just saying about accessibility. I was thinking, like, what do you, and obviously you don't have to answer this now if you don't have the answer, but like, do you consider like vision impaired folks when you're doing these designs? Because it seems very like a visual experience a lot of the time. So is that considered as well?
Absolutely. And it should be. And that's I feel like there's a lot of people from different fields that go into UX. I think a lot of maybe graphic designers think they can go into it because like I already know design and, you know, all these things, but they forget about all these different aspects that go into it. And one of them is the accessibility for visually impaired people. And yeah, I mean, for us, like we do reports, and I actually do a lot of the internal accessibility scans when we do our reports, if they're like simple. But yeah, we have to make sure that the color ratio is accurate above like I can't remember what the actual number is, but yeah, we make sure that that's fine. Make sure the font is at a certain level. Another thing that I thought was interesting is that underlining words should only be used for hyperlinks and not for anything else, because that throws people off, because you automatically think like, oh, that's a link, but it may not be a link if you click on it. So that's part of an experience. But
that's helpful information to have. I'm gonna use that in the future, Ben.
Hey, if you ever want to consult with me, I'm happy to look over documents and provide expertise.
Then we will absolutely need your services. Especially, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, whenever we build a website, Rebecca, like we got to get Ben on this, on the ground floor action.
Yeah, happy to help. But yeah, I mean, you have to make sure that things, like there's just so many different ways that websites can better visually impaired people and people who probably, you know, can't hear for whatever reason. Like you see the closed captioning. And again, it's always about just providing that experience. You know, we do a lot of alt text for photos because if they have a screen reader, they need to be able to like, have that described. And we do like, that's one thing I've run into. So I use a design software called Figma, which I love Figma. It's really cool. But what's interesting is that when I do data visuals on there and then export it to PDF, it kind of flattens everything. Kind of if you like take different colors of Play-Doh and just like flatten it into one thing, it doesn't necessarily, it can't read it. So like the PDF will think it's an image. And so people who are visually impaired won't be able to know what that data says in that visual. And so we've had to come up with like a workaround and using like another software so that it is readable by them. Because you can't, if it's important information, they need to know about it.
Yeah. But it looks so pretty.
Yeah, it may look pretty. I mean, they won't be able to see it though.
I know.
That's what I keep thinking. I'm like, are there like times where you're like, oh, like this is, they go in like opposition. You're like, my design kind of says that I should make it this way, but for accessibility, I'm going to have to sacrifice the design.
And that's part of the iteration process too. Like I did a visual for first generation students, and like I had this web of like avatars. You guys know what avatars are? Like they're like blank photos of people. Yeah. Okay. So I did this web, but I had this design in the back, and I was like, something's off. Like this look is too cluttered. Like I don't think something is readable. So like I removed the background. And I was like, oh, this is so much better. So like, it's all part of the iteration process when you like, you may have this great design that you think is great. You've been looking at it for so long. And then you pass it off and get other people's feedback. And then you get their feedback and say like, oh, did you consider this? And you're like, oh crap. Now I need to go back and like edit it so that it is accessible by, you know, XYZ person or something like that. So it's a whole iteration process.
I hate that. I'm going to be real. Like when I worked in politics, I made the flyers for like the events because you could like do everything and like when you're doing fundraising, and like there would be so many iterations, and like half the time I would end up back where like I originally pitched, and I literally don't know how graphic designers and people do that because it drove me nuts. It just felt like you were never done. I could never do that. Like bless those who can. It is not me. Do not give me that much feedback.
And like, yeah, it's definitely, you have to learn to do that. And you also have to learn to accept feedback and like criticism from other people, because you have to realize it's not yours. It's not your art. Like we're not artists, like we're designing for a population, for an audience. And so you have to consider that. But at some point you just have to be done, you know, and like Jackie, you do a lot of painting, like, and I used to draw and paint too. And it's like, you always look at it and be like, what else can I do with this? But at some point you have to be like, no, stop. Like you're done. Like just step away and just release it out into the world.
And I'm fine with criticism. What drove me nuts about that iteration process is that it's like, no one ever gives all of their criticism in one batch, right? And that was what always drove me nuts, because it would be like, okay, we did change these 12 things. And they're like, now I want to change 9 more things. And I'm like, I get it, because I have also been the client on the other side saying, oh, now that we've changed this, I see that I actually want that over to the left a little bit. It's something I never had patience to do. And I think it is, like, you're right, it's a really good skill to have, to be able to like constantly hear things, not take it personally, like redo things that you might have already done, and not be incredibly infuriated by clients like me.
And I think one thing you have to consider too is when I make certain design choices, it's all about communication. You have to communicate out to the client, be like, I made this choice because of XYZ. Like, you have to tell them that you know what you're talking about, and this is what you're doing. And then the same thing, when I get feedback from other people, I need you to tell me why. Because like, if you just like, oh, I just don't like how that looks, I'm like, well, that's a really stupid response. Can you tell me like why you don't like it? Like, I just need to have my why as to like why it's gross.
It's really blocking my chi. And
I mean, feng shui is very valid, you know?
So valid.
Now, do you like, oh, what, go ahead, Jackie.
Go ahead, Bex.
Do you, Ben, work with like, or I guess the typical UX experience, are you working as like one person for a company or for a client, or is it like a team? Is there ever like multiple UX designers on a team, or do they just need one?
There's definitely multiple people on a team. If you have like a big company, or if you have a company that has a lot of money, like I said, sometimes you have designer, you have a UX designer, you have a UI designer, you have a UX researcher, UX writer, and sometimes you maybe only have one UX designer on your team. And so that's kind of where I'm at, because I work at a small center, and so like I'm the only one that does what I do. But luckily, I work with a bunch of researchers so they know the value of having design and having that information relayed in like a proper way. However, I do get a lot of pushback from them too. And so I'm like, you guys, this doesn't make sense. Like, this isn't readable, or like, you can do this color in this line or whatever. So I wish I had another designer on the team to kind of have that person that I could bounce ideas back and forth. I have a communications manager, but even that's like completely different than what I do. So yeah.
What is the UX writer? Is that just like, because I remember technical writing is like a manual writing, and that's kind of in my head when I'm like equating it to. Is that what it is? Like, they're writing the what the fuck are they writing?
Usually the UX writer is all about just writing like clear, concise information. So about like trying to think of it, like anytime you go on an app and it's like, oh, like, do you want to exit the screen or whatever, and like you have 2 options. If those 2 options are super vague or not like they don't really match the question, that is what the UX writer comes in and do. It's like, how can we make this as clear as possible and have 2 responses that are like that match that. And then also the UX writer kind of thinks about the audience to kind of, should I change the verbiage of this to make it sound like cooler for like a younger website, or like, so it always has to match the audience. Like, if you're going to use like,
do you want to exit this page? No, yes, this
queen.
is Liddy.
Yeah, like you could use yes queen on like Grindr or Scruff or something, but you couldn't do that for like an AARP website.
Oh, please,
yeah,
please.
No
cap.
So that's like what the UX writer does. And I find the writing so interesting more and more because of what we do. In my job, we do a lot of surveys and evaluation for higher education. And we spend literally meetings dissecting words and their meanings. And I find it so interesting that like a common example I go to is like the word success does different meanings to different people. And so you have to think about your audience. Like, you have to define certain words to kind of meet that audience. And so that kind of like what a UX writer does, more or less.
Okay. I love thinking of like this office and this team of like, I don't know, I could like see all the different personalities, like the logical, cold researchers and builders, and then like colorful designer that's like, it simply must be rearranged. Like, I feel like you would get certain personalities attracted to this role.
Oh my God, I feel so dumb in my job every day.
No.
Yeah. Everyone has like their masters or PhDs, and I'm like, I'm just a designer.
I feel the same way at my job sometimes too. I think it happens to when you're surrounded by brilliant people, it's hard to not feel dumb, even if you're brilliant yourself, which I know that you are. But I think, yeah, it sounds like you have like a different knowledge set. So you're like, listen,
Yeah.
back the fuck up on the design stuff. But when they start talking about science words around me, I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You've lost me.
Yeah, and like soft skills and hard skills are hard to, you can't compare them. And then I'm sure it's like, it feels like you're not, or like it comes naturally to you, but it's like may just be something like someone could just not possibly conceive of, and you just do it second nature.
Yeah, it's all, and you always have to like learn how to, and every designer works on this too, I'm sure other people do, is that silencing that imposter syndrome too. We're like, oh, I suck at what I do. Like, why am I even here?
I think my brother, who's like incredibly successful, like I was really struggling with imposter syndrome one time, and I called him and I was like, no, like I just feel like I'm not good enough. I had started a new job, and he was just like, oh, you mean like that first 3 months where you walk in and you're just sure that everyone's going to tell you that you're full of shit? And I was like, wait, you have that feeling too? Like, and he was like, yeah, like everyone has that. And I think you're totally right. Like, it's not like success, like talking about like the definition of success. Success is not doing everything right the first time. Success is standing up when you fall down. And that's my definition, right? Like, it is the persistence and, some of my biggest highlights in my career have come from when I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get fired. And then I overcame the issue, and like people are like, oh, good job. So I think you're right. And then like that, I mean, I'm like thinking about like kind of what you were saying with that language piece and like spending a whole meeting like dissecting it, because I can imagine that, right? Like if you're asking like, was this program a success in a survey? Some people might define success as that you got through the program and it was, it happened, right? Some people might define it as accomplishing the goals, and some people might define it as perfection, right? Like I'm probably leaning towards the perfection one, where like if you ask me if something was successful, I rarely will say that it was fully successful unless I feel like I accomplished what was perfection.
Totally. Yeah. That's what you always have to follow up. Like, what do you mean by that? Because I may have found myself successful, but you may not have thought I was successful.
Right.
Are you like the doctor now that like sees all the symptoms when you're out there in the world? Like you see all the user design issues, or can you like turn your brain off when it's not your client, not your problem?
See it. Yeah, I'm always like, this is a terrible design. Like I like hate that. I get like super irritated about it. And that's what's so different, I think, about like designers versus artists. Like artists do something to have like an emotional joy kind of, and doesn't really have to solve a problem, whereas designers do solve problems every day. And I feel like I've been doing that my entire life, but trying to like kind of do something like solve problems creatively, and that's kind of essentially what a designer does.
I actually like really
but
love
yeah,
that.
I do see that.
And I've never like thought of it that way. Like art is like, invoking an emotion, like trying to create kind of like it's creation. Whereas like, like design, like you are designing a home an efficient way, like going back to the architect thing, right? To solve a problem, not for beauty, right? That's why we talk about like Frank Lloyd, right? That was the guy's name, right?
Yeah.
Like he encapsulated both, and that was so rare, right? But I think design really is there to solve that problem. It is to be innovative. It is to like find the solution of a gap. I've never thought of it that way. That's really cool.
And you're rarely designing something for yourself too. And so like, I always tell people, I'm like, what you think doesn't matter because you may not be the audience. Like, and so like, it doesn't really, like I was helping someone and he was like kind of going through stuff. He was like, oh, I did this like this. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't matter what you think. Like, you're not necessarily the audience member.
Do you ever have to like say that to yourself and be like, yeah, I hate this color, but like everybody likes it, or like this font or whatever it may be in that design, and just be like, like it cringes you, but it works for everyone else?
I mean, sometimes I do have to bite my tongue where I'm like super adamant about like how something looks, and then I'll like run it by multiple people at my job who will contradict how I feel about it. I'm like, damn it. Like, well, that's it. I guess it doesn't matter what I think. Well, I guess I'll do it. be
I
annoyed.
made a different logo for the pod at one point, and like I was because we hired somebody to make our logo, and like we love it, it's great. And then I like one point I was like, I want to make it better, and I made it, and I was like so proud of it. I even like tested it with people. I was like, do you like this one or do you like this one? And then people kind of like were split, but I got a little bit more people liking my new logo. I put it up on the podcast and literally we got 0 subscribers the 2 weeks that it was up. And like we had some before and some after, and people freaking hated that logo apparently. I didn't take it personally.
So you can't, but you can't make that assumption. You don't know like what other factors kind of played into that.
When I changed it back, we automatically started getting new subscribers. It was I
Huh. Yeah, but I can't imagine someone's going to subscribe to something based on what the logo's like.
I don't know. I think my thought was that it looked childish a little bit. Like as I looked at it more, I was like, "This looks young," and the other one looks more
I gotta go back and look at it.
I'll show it to you. Let's see if I can find it.
We'll do a whole case study. All of our guests will have to use their expertise on our pod.
Yes. Here, Ben, I'll text it. Oh no, wait, that's the old one.
Yeah, even the very first one that I made with like clip art stuff. It's like, an iteration, and then we were like, we need something more readable, and like with the brand, like I don't know, the brand identity coming through more clearly.
Yeah, because at first we had like a very it was like had like a bunch of little icons on it, like all the little topics that we covered, and then we went with this like much cleaner, much simpler one. I'm like trying to find this. Oh, there it is. I made
we kind of were going for like different little icons representing all the different topics, but then it's like, well, then there's no clarity. And now our current logo is just like a starburst of color, but it's our colors that we always use. And then it's just like, well, then the title is speaking for itself, which is kind of all you can get and fit in like a tiny little app screen, app where it might be a really small icon. And that way, like, we are thinking about like not just like the ultra high resolution image that we're looking at all blown up when we're making the image. It's like, what it's going to ultimately end up is like a 1 inch by 1 inch icon. And how readable is that?
Right.
Okay, Ben. I texted it to you. The circle was not on there because that's what I was trying to see what the like what would show up on one of the icons. So ignore the little black circle, but you can see what I created.
Yeah, I don't like it. Also, there's a good chance that the green font isn't accessible on there.
Oh, see?
Yeah. And also the atom in the back also I don't think is like it's not clear. Like it's like that's also not accessible, I don't think.
Okay, so not only is it ugly, but it's also it's not accessible. So, well, don't worry, we didn't keep it because apparently people don't like my hard labor that I would. And this is why I'm not a graphic designer, folks. We'll put it up somewhere so you all can judge me. But
don't throw Rebecca under the bus. This is all
let's see if I can find Rebecca's one. Rebecca originally had one too. But anyways, okay, so I think one question I do have is what does it take to get into UX design?
Yeah, honestly, there's so many different people that go into UX design from different fields. Like there are people who are teachers, there are people who were in marketing, people who had a science background. And so a lot of it is really trying to, so you can do it multiple ways. You can get into it on your own and try to look at, look back at your jobs, see what you've done, how can it be applied to UX design and do it that way and do research on your own. Or you can take a boot camp, which is what a lot of people do. That's what I did. I actually took 3 different ones through, I'll do a plug for Design Lab Academy, which I really enjoyed. But so I didn't really have a design background. So I started with the foundations of UX design and I actually didn't pass. So, and then they were like, we would encourage you to do the foundations of UI design. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I actually passed that. And then I did my boot camp. I did the part-time boot camp, which was for 6 months. I think it was like 20 hours a week or so. And so I ended up passing that. I definitely don't recommend the full-time because people were super overwhelmed by how much work they had to do. So that's what a lot of people do is they take these boot camps. One thing I'll do that I will say is that UX is super, super competitive. Every time I look at jobs on LinkedIn for UX or for UX designers or any type of that, there is like, especially like the big companies like Google and Apple and all those tech companies, they have like hundreds and hundreds of applicants that are applying to these roles. So you either really have to know someone or have to be really good at what you do. I really encourage people to look into, they may not get the salary that they want for as a UX designer, but I really encourage people to look at non-traditional institutions like higher education, the medical field, government, because those types of institutions really lack in user experience. If you've ever been to any of those sites, they like, it's not just them though, they just like are not user friendly. Like they just are so hard to navigate through. And I think they're slowly getting better. But
especially colleges
they
too. I feel like every university webpage loads slowly and you're like, what is this old dinosaur doing? You know, you just like don't put your trust in it.
100%. Like our website for my center like sucks. Like it needs to be completely redone. And so I'm trying to help them do it. And I'm working on my application for grad school. And so like it just, those types of places really, really need the support. But it's a challenge because you have to convince them that it's needed. So that's like another challenge too. You'll spend a lot of time as a UX designer convincing people that you're necessary.
I mean, I feel that we're event planners, right? We have to spend a lot of time that people are like, don't you just pick out the napkins? And I'm like, I wish that's all I did. That would be preferred. That makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna send you Rebecca's logo first too.
Okay.
Our first logo.
And then I do actually have one plug for you too, Jackie, or for the podcast.
Okay, we'll Rebecca and I will sum up in a second here once we get your feedback on our logo.
The final requirement.
I want mine.
I also don't love it, but I actually think it's a little bit better than Jackie's. But I also don't know if that green is accessible.
Okay, that is
we did not pass the accessibility test.
We didn't even pass the design test, Bex.
It is hard though. I still like, it doesn't tell you like what you do, like what this is for both of them really.
Okay, this is our current. This is our
current.
I
thought the one that was on the thing was your current one.
Yes, our Starburst.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love this one either, to be honest, but.
We don't either, but
it doesn't detract from the like message. It doesn't like really give something, but it's like, okay, well, it's working.
I will have to check on the accessibility though for this. I mean, I think the black does help. The shadow behind it does help, but I think it's really it's harder to see with all the different like the zebra striping in the back.
Okay, well, season 2, new branding image coming soon. Okay, that was our final test.
One thing I do want to plug though, for anyone who's interested in UX design, this is like the Bible of UX design, The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. It is a great book, and it talks about how designs are everywhere, even outside of websites and everything. It's a great.
I could tell by the picture that teapot would make no sense.
Yeah, teapot with the handle on the wrong side.
Exactly, right?
Like that was already bothering me.
Right?
Okay, Bex, are we doing this?
All right, let's put the handle on the right side of things.
You're so good at those. Okay.
That was so good.
I know, she's so good at like the tying things back. It's I get jealous. Okay, so I have multiple sheets of paper, all different. So this is already not designed well. But you have multiple roles under the UX umbrella. You got UX design, you got UXI, you got UX writer, you got product design, customer experience, and then I just wrote info, and I don't know what the fuck I was going to do with that.
I did see that you
like
have
an informational experience designer.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
You're welcome.
But you have to put your design thinking into data reports.
Mm-hmm. and you want to do a lot of research, because you got a lot there. You want to do a lot of research, like if you already have like an existing app, going into the app store, is there customer surveys, like access data that already exists. Otherwise, you can do things like a competitive analysis, a focus group, A/B testing, which is this or that questions. Rebecca?
And then you get your report into your black and whites, your color frames, and then onto the style guide, and then you start making iterations with Figma.
Okay, no. You start with a create a site map, okay? That's where you start. And then you do the home screen, then you get into the black and whites. And then he said something about a wireframe, which I did not understand.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go to hi-fi, high fidelity, which is colors. And that has the style guide. And then you have a lot of review, and then there's something about Figma, and you do sprints sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Because you don't want to do it all at once, because that's a lot.
Break it down into smaller pieces.
Oh,
and then you question
artists
your
don't
life
solve
choices.
Problems. Yeah, you question your life choices. You know that artists don't solve problems, but designers do. Quote Ben on that. And you can get into it by doing a boot camp or getting an education in it. A high recommendation for doing something like higher education or government, where their sites don't actually work. They could really use something, because getting it at Google or something like that is going to be highly competitive. So get the nonprofits behind your belt.
Get creative and start doing some creative solutions.
I love that. How we do? Did we do good? Did we get it now?
You guys are experts now.
Are we designers?
You're designers.
Okay.
Good job.
Just need a better logo.
I'm glad that at least he agreed that the best logo was the one that we're actually using. That does actually make me feel a little bit better. You'll have to go to our YouTube page at one day and tell us all your judgments of us. I won't take it personally.
So. Listen, it's free. It's free criticism. It's great.
Do you normally pay for criticism?
I mean, consultation.
You know what? You're right. You're right. Like going to a plastic surgeon, that is paying for criticism.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. This was incredibly, I learned probably more in this episode than I have in a lot of episodes.
Oh, that's nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a good one. I think it's something we all access all the time. We're just not always aware of it. And we're like part of the research too, that like can make products and different, things. I don't know. I'm like trying to think what the category is. Like buildings.
We're going to make things. Things and better. Mm-hmm. All right. We're going to go be experts.
Okay.
That was great. And that was the show. Thank you everyone for watching, and we hope you stay curious.
If you enjoyed this video, watch our other videos here on YouTube, or you should listen to the episode on We're Experts Now podcast. Bex, where can they find us?
You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeart Music.
And what if they want to talk to us?
If you have ideas for something you want us to investigate, send us an email at we'reexpertspod@gmail.com. That's wereexpertspod@gmail.com.
Great job on that spelling. Ooh. A+. Do you do this professionally?
I believe we're both doing it professionally right now.
Wow. People should know about this.
I completely agree. And you can find us on Instagram at We're Experts Now Pod.
Thanks again. And if you enjoy the show, subscribe and comment, and do not forget to leave a 5-star tip.
That's a great idea. Are you a podcast expert?
I think we both are. I think
we're experts now.
This has been a Just Being Better media production.